Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome
Welcome.
to IG Live. I'm sorry, you're the host.
So, hi guys, thank you for jumping on. I am with Dr. Larry here. He is a medical doctor in ER, and he's also a medical expert for Fox News in San Francisco. So it's really exciting to have you on the live today. I feel extremely honored. Medicine and science and all that stuff is like really important to me, and I'm really passionate about it. I mentioned just before I used to study paramedicine a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'm just so excited to hear what you have to say about COVID, about everything happening in the world right now. So thank you.
No, it's great to be here. You were telling me your mom was a nurse
Mhm.
and you were interested in being a paramedic, and
Yeah.
but your path went other ways, chasing adventure and excitement and job opportunities. Maybe you'll come back to it one day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Would you introduce yourself to
your fans?
these guys?
All right, so I'm Beth, for anyone that is on Larry's lives. I'm a full-time model. I also have run my own business in health and business coaching for the past 6 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, like I said before, I used to study paramedicine. So yeah, this is all very exciting for me. I have also just been traveling the world for the past couple of years, even including this year. Despite the pandemic, I have done quite a bit of travel as well, mainly just for work. So yeah, that's me.
And we were talking earlier, you lived in Bali, you've been in Dubai, like you really have been all over the world. And now in COVID, and what was that like? I feel like most of us can kind of live vicariously through some of your travels, wishing we could do that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, travel right now is not easy.
You have to do this for work. Like you have to be in certain places for your job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I have a lot of people messaging me all the time saying, oh my God, you're so lucky to be traveling right now. And yeah, I am so lucky, but it's also really hard. I mean, things are changing constantly. I was supposed to be in the UK right now starting a work visa, but the UK went into lockdown, and then I was going to go back to Canada, and then they went in lockdown. So it's just, yeah, everything can just get put on hold at any second. So lucky, but also it's a struggle.
Yeah, it's that moving target for all of us. You know, for you, it affects your life and your work and everything. And I think a lot of us here too. Even in California, it's like 1 month restaurants are open and the next month they're closed. Same thing for gyms and everybody. There's a change seems to be the theme of the year.
Yeah, it's exactly what it feels like. But why don't we dive straight into the questions? I have a lot of questions for you. Some are from me, and quite a few are also from people that are following me. So
I know, I'm impressed at how prepared you were. I saw you earlier getting these questions together. I'm a little bit, anxious to see what we're dealing with here.
Be nervous.
Yeah, no, I'm a little nervous.
But yeah, so anyone that doesn't know Larry, I mean, I introduced him just before, but he is obviously a frontline doctor in America, in California. I mean, you're working in Northern California right now. And everyone knows that the COVID cases here are really high. So it's so good to be talking to someone that's experiencing this like firsthand, and even just hearing some of your stories are like super interesting. So yeah, this guy knows what's up.
Let's do it.
What's up? All right. So first question. Well, I want to ask a little bit more about you first. Where did you study? How long have you been practicing? Things like that.
Yeah, I'm from Kansas City. I went to college at Notre Dame, which was away from home, and then I came home and went to KU. Go Jayhawks! We just beat Kentucky yesterday. If anybody saw that, big victory. So I went to med school at KU, and then that was 2006. So 14, almost 15 years ago, moved to California for residency. I did residency in family medicine, and then for almost 12 years, almost 11 and a half, 12 years, I've worked I do ER. I think everybody knows what that is. You get sick, you go to the emergency room. I'm the doctor there that takes care of whoever walks in the door.
Yep.
I also do this thing called hospitalist, which if Granny gets sick and stays in the hospital, I wouldn't see her anymore after the ER, but I also do the job where the doctor rounds with them. I've been practicing ER a lot this year all over California. I went to New York for a week during the surge in the spring. And so that was really, really crazy and traumatic. You and I were talking earlier. COVID is like no disease that I've ever seen before because it can take out so many different systems. And I don't think everybody should freak out and be afraid. Most people are going to be fine. But when people get really sick, it's bad. It's really bad. I came home to California and worked in a surge hospital in Los Angeles. It wasn't needed. California didn't, we were all worried that it was going to go crazy like New York and Italy, but for some reason, California dodged that bullet. So that closed, and I've continued to work in ERs. And what I saw was cases, COVID cases went up in the summer in California, not so much the spring, but they did go up in the summer. And then they tightened things down, and it went down in October, and then starting in November. And at one hospital I was at, we didn't have a single case of COVID for a month, which is kind of crazy, right?
That's insane, yeah.
And now it's starting to go up again, a couple few a day, and it's doing this more and more. And as that happens, people end up getting sicker, needing to stay in the hospital, needing oxygen, needing all of this stuff. And so I've seen it kind of like be crazy and kind of go down. And now it's doing this again. And it's the numbers are bad. It just, I think a lot of us are bracing for the worst. Heading into the winter. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I guess we'll hope that it'll be the same as last time and not be as bad as everyone was expecting it to be in LA.
I hope that the change, nobody likes restrictions and all this stuff, but I do hope that it lowers the numbers and, ultimately protects people.
Yeah.
We can get into some of that stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess, what I've loved from our conversations that we've already had off this live is that you have like a very balanced approach to how to handle COVID. We're seeing so many ends of the spectrums, like people saying it's a complete scam. And then there's people that are like so afraid of it, they won't even leave their house. And, there's so many different messages from the media and, other experts and whatever. And I watched a lot of your videos, and I like that you just have like this sense of like balance, like, like in one of your videos about Thanksgiving, you're like, okay, we don't want to kill grandma this Thanksgiving. So, here are some things that we can do to prevent, affecting people that are fragile in this time, like things like that. So yeah, I'm excited to hear a lot of what you have to say, and I'm sure everyone is.
Thanks for watching those. I appreciate that. That's nice.
I did some.
You did your homework. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thank you.
Yeah. So, you kind of just touched on this, but how busy is your hospital with COVID and some of the hospitals you've worked in? Is it as overrun as what the media has kind of shown it to be? At the start of this whole pandemic, it was just so much media footage in hospitals and people on ventilators. Is that still something that you've seen, or is that something that's still happening right now?
When I went to New York, that was true. It was bad.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't even know how to explain how overwhelming it was. Normally, critical patients are in the ICU. They had them all over the hospital. So being taken care of by not critical care nurses, like really that surge was a mass casualty event where, unfortunately, what you have to do in those things is you can't give perfect care to everybody. You do your best with what you've got. That's really shocking when you haven't worked in that. I hadn't worked in that kind of a thing before. And so you're like doing things. So one thing, for example, is in the beginning, they said, well, don't put COVID people on this mask.
Yep.
That ventilates them because it'll blow COVID everywhere. So I went to New York thinking, okay, we're not going to do that. When I got there, they were putting it on everybody. And I was like, what is this? And then I was like, they're doing it because this is the best thing that they can, with this situation. It was a mass casualty thing. And there's so many examples at that time to what was that thing. Let me give you one other one. Everybody talks about COVID attacking the lungs and causing respiratory failure. You need to be put on a ventilator. They all freaked out about, do we have enough ventilators? And that was a big conversation for a while. But in the hospital I worked at in New York, that wasn't the thing that they ran out of. They ran out of the ability to do dialysis. When somebody's kidneys fail and they don't work, you have about a week. And if they don't start working again and they don't get their blood filtered by a machine, which is what dialysis is, then somebody will die. And what happened in New York is the specific nurse that's trained to run that machine, the dialysis nurse, they got sick. And they were down to one dialysis nurse. One dialysis takes a couple hours. So one nurse in a day can do what, 5 patients? So you've got all these patients. I don't even know how many they had, but if you got 20 patients, 10 patients that need dialysis, they were dying because they didn't have the ability to do dialysis. So that stuff was real.
Yeah.
It never got that bad in California. You asked, is what we're seeing now and we're hearing about beds filling up and people worrying about it getting critical. Yeah, in certain places, that's absolutely true. The people I listen to the most are the doctors' voices, like ICU doctors, ICU nurses, the people working on the ground. It's hard to know with the media because, you get so many different things from the media. There's always going to be somewhere on fire, right? There's always going to be some hospital, some small hospital, some whatever. But I think it's true. The big picture is, beds are filling up in ICUs and we're getting worried about it. Now, the places that I'm working at, they're not at that critical level yet in California. Yeah. No. Again, but it's like looking forward, what's going to happen in the end of December and January? Well, if the numbers keep going up, then it is going to be a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And do you feel like a lot of the patients you have, like, are they young people? Is it a mix of everything? Is it elderly? Is it people with pre-existing conditions? Like, what are the sort of patients that you saw in this critical condition?
When I was in New York, we had one that I would call a young, healthy person that was a little bit overweight, but really didn't have any other medical conditions. And the virus had affected her heart and caused some kind of heart failure, myocarditis. She recovered. She lived. A lot of my patients didn't. She was like the only young, healthy person. Most of them, obese, diabetic, old, nursing home. Like, a lot of folks were close to their end anyway. And then, like, COVID kind of came through and took them. I had a patient the other day that was in his 30s, was probably 350 pounds, didn't know he was diabetic, got COVID, his oxygen level went down, he was short of breath, we had to admit him. I told him he was diabetic for the first time.
Wow.
His normal blood sugar is like 100, his was 450, which is super high.
Wow.
And so he's young, but he's not in good condition. And so, risk factors, age, definitely, all these other conditions, the sicker you are, to begin with, the worse it is. COVID it's like the Grim Reaper rolling through nursing homes.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And so what do you feel like, if it's affecting people with pre-existing conditions and, older people that, like you mentioned, are usually on their way out or close to. Some, yeah.
Yeah, some.
How do you feel it is with, like these lockdowns and restrictions? Even with closing schools, one of the questions someone actually asked is, does COVID affect children? As, we've been told it doesn't, and now we've been told it does. Yeah. You
want to do the children one?
Yeah, we'll jump into that.
Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go, host?
Yeah, so like obviously does it affect children, but do you think that like, all these restrictions and lockdowns are helpful? I mean, people are really suffering with, financially, businesses are closing.
Yeah.
I mean, I even mentioned this with John on my last live. I mean, the homelessness here is just crazy. I've never seen anything like it. So how do we manage that?
A lot of questions in there. Let's start with the children, because we've heard different things about that. If you take the flu, if you compare it to the flu typically kills the youngest and the oldest. So influenza does kill children, especially young children under a year, 6 months. COVID really doesn't kill kids like that. So it's not as deadly to children. That's a big difference with the flu.
Yeah.
The message has kind of changed back and forth about, initially we were worried children were carriers. Well, they don't get very sick. They really don't die very often, but young children may bring it home and give it to their parents or older grandparents or whatever. And so you got to be careful about that. So a lot of maybe 3 or 4 months ago, the word on the street was little grade school kids, not as big of a deal, but high school and college young people, these appear to be the carriers. These guys get it. Maybe they don't have symptoms or they're not that sick, but they bring it home to older people that do, and in that way kind of spread the virus.
Yeah.
But I saw a recent study in the last week or two that showed, and this was, the reason I like this one is because they came to these conclusions based on the contact tracing. Like that's the source of knowledge where it's like, okay, somebody got it. Where did they get it? Who did they give it to? That's how we learn how this thing really, and that showed that younger children maybe can be a source of spread of this thing, maybe more than we thought before. And you and I talked about this before. It's hard. There's a real challenge with messaging. I feel for all of the public officials that are out there doing their best to help people and balance these issues of economy and people's well-being and mental sanity. There's all these issues that we have to account for. There isn't just one scoreboard, right? It's not like the scoreboard is dead of COVID and that's it.
Yeah.
Because that's not it. That's certainly a big one. What about people that survive, but then they're debilitated? What about young people who get it, but then have this post-COVID syndrome where they have headaches or fatigue or shortness of breath afterwards? That ought to be on the scoreboard too. And then you have to have all of the collateral damage, all of the things that we don't intend, people being out of work, mental health stuff, sexual, physical abuse at home because there's domestic violence, children, and on and on and on and on. It gets very complicated. I don't know what are we putting it on a scale?
Yeah.
I don't know how you weigh that stuff. I mean, what do you think about that? It gets very complicated. All of this stuff matters. So I think if you are only looking at it through a very narrow window of public health, where the only thing that matters is that death number for the United States, you're not taking into account the whole thing, the big picture.
And I guess, I mean, in the things that I've looked up, with COVID and the death rate of it and everything, I mean, sometimes you could compare it to like other causes of death, and like it's nowhere near the leading causes of death. I mean, even driving a car is dangerous, and you're very likely to, die in a car crash. Well, it's not going to stop us from driving cars. It's not like, okay, everyone, you have to walk everywhere now, so it's like, I mean, it's so difficult to like weigh up, like, the world basically being shut down over a virus with like a very high survival rate. So, yeah. Yeah.
So let's put that in perspective. If in the United States, for example, you can take examples of all over the world of this. New Zealand, your cousin, we call him cousin. What is New Zealand to Australia?
A cousin, I guess.
Do you not like them? You gave that look on your face like you're like, New Zealand.
I have a lot of friends from New Zealand. I haven't been to New Zealand, but I love everything about the people there. So
you're from Perth. Is that not close to New Zealand?
It's on the other side of Australia.
Oh, shoot.
yeah, it's a bit far.
I don't mean to offend Australians that I didn't know. I've been to Melbourne. Australia's a great country.
Oh, good.
I'd love to go back. A buddy of mine's in Byron Bay. He's from Sydney, so I'd love to go visit him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Kai.
Yeah, I know Kai. I think Kai might even be on this live right now.
Kai,
so
if you're on, what's
hi,
up?
Kai.
Give me a shout out.
Like, subscribe, leave a comment.
What were we talking about?
We're talking about New Zealand and
So let me give you an example. So San Francisco, for example, in the United States. So the story was in the spring, this thing starts to come out in December and January. Is it going to be something? Is it nothing? And then we start to figure out February and March, oh man, this is bad. San Francisco, the mayor, London Breed, God bless her, she made a good decision and she shut stuff down. She did it 5 days before New York got it together. Now that's a huge Herculean task to shut down that massive city and to get people to buy into it and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But those 5 days, probably saved tens of thousands of lives. And the flip side of that is that every day New York didn't, compared to San Francisco, so many people died.
Mm-hmm.
So many people died. And there was something that could have been done for it. When you look at San Francisco, if you take the death rate per person, it's one of the lowest in the entire country.
Mm.
And so if you would apply that, I think there's like 260,000 Americans dead. If the entire country would have done things like San Francisco did, it's complicated. There's a lot of different factors. But if it had the same death rate, it would have saved tens of thousands. I want to say 60,000, 80,000, tons of lives. And so, when you're kind of asking, well, what's the big deal? Like, people are dying of car crashes. We're not going to stop for that. People still die of heart attacks and cancer. I think it's 600,000 Americans die of heart disease and I think cardiovascular disease and cancer per year. It's like, it's not that bad. But the flip side of it is there's things we could have done that could have saved substantial lives. And we're, tens of thousands. And 260,000 is where we're at now. Imagine if we did nothing.
Mm.
What would that number be if we didn't do anything?
Yeah.
And some would have put it at a couple million.
Yeah.
And then it's like, holy shit, and we could have done something. That's the argument on the side of, these restrictions and masks and whatever. Now, the reality of it is, if you wore a mask and kept a distance, if people did that, in theory, I don't think you'd have to restrict stuff as much. Right? It's precisely because we don't follow all that stuff that the government's like, well, what are we going to do? We just got to, I've got my own opinion on better ways to do it, but
yeah.
So that's the side arguing for shutting stuff down. And let me say this. The people that I was with who died in New York, it was some of the saddest, worst deaths I had ever seen. It was awful. One lady was upper 80s, 88. Her daughter took care of her for years. And when I first saw this lady, I knew she was dying. I knew she was not going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing everything we could, and I thought we should have let her go because I thought she was just going to suffer. But this was her life. She spoke Spanish. I speak Spanish, but not many people in that hospital did. She was completely alone. Her daughter, at that time, they had teams trying to communicate with the family. I took my iPhone and I went in and I would FaceTime the daughter to the mother every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is the most meaningful thing I'm going to do for this family is help this daughter get through her mother's death. Because that's what's happening. There's no medicine. There was nothing. She was 88, right?
Mm.
The daughter couldn't visit her because the hospital policy was you can only come and visit if they're going to die like in 30 minutes, which is crazy.
Wow.
Because they didn't want it to get out and to get anybody else sick, and everybody in the hospital had COVID. But the result of it was, this poor woman died. Those of us who were there did our best to hold her hand and to be with her and to talk with her. But she died alone. Awful death. Prolonged suffering of days. She didn't just get taken quickly with a heart attack and pass in her sleep.
Yeah.
That's bad.
So do you think, the hardest thing is like more than COVID? Obviously COVID is horrible for the people that are dying of it, but do you think it's even worse that families can't even say goodbye to their loved ones? And they're saying young people have a 99% survival rate. So it's like,
right.
Yes, the family might get COVID, like going to say goodbye, but they could still quarantine or isolate for 2 weeks. If that was my parents or a grandparent passing away, I would happily get COVID and quarantine or whatever, just to say goodbye.
Yeah. I completely agree with the value that you're finding. A lot of times in medicine, the values of safety and, not wanting to be sued, sometimes that is too high over being human and saying goodbye and having moments with Granny. So when I was there, I saw this really soon, and you could see, as a doctor, you can be in denial and be like, we're going to save them, we're going to do everything. But I've done this long enough where you can kind of get a sense of a patient. No, they're not going to survive. And if that's the case, A, let's keep them as comfortable as possible. B, do we really want to prolong their suffering before they exit the world? And in my perspective is no, we need to keep them comfortable and minimize that suffering, which means letting them go, which means saying goodbye. And so when I was there, I was like, talk to the charge nurse. I was like, we need to work around this rule. We need to work around this. I need families to come. I need people to be able to come in and say goodbye.
Yeah.
This is, it's a work of mercy. It's one of these, I can't save their life, but this still matters for both of them in that moment. Let me tell you one more story. And the reason I want to deliver this is because you don't hear about this. These numbers in the media, they're just numbers. They're abstract. They don't mean anything. On both sides, not only to give meaning to death, but then also I think we should have, what's the meaning when people lose businesses and they're newly homeless and all of the, it's stories and people that makes it real. And the conversation in the media is too abstract. We don't get it. So this other one is very similar. I was the ER doctor, and I was called up to this room where this elderly woman, 60s, she'd been on the ventilator for weeks, like 3 weeks. She was slowly getting worse. So her chances of surviving, and she was not in good shape, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, all of it. Her chances are, and she had kidney failure, and all of these organ systems were failing.
Right.
And I was called up because she had already had multiple cardiac arrests, that they had done chest compressions and they had brought her back. And they brought me up there because she was having another one. I went in there and I was going to do everything. And I looked at it and I was like, you're a paramedic. See if you remember this. So I went in there and we could have done all of the CPR, and I saw this. What do you do to that rhythm? Do you remember?
Oh God, it was like 6-7 years ago. But
you shock it. So you don't have to do chest compression. And I said, that's a shockable rhythm. Shock her and get her family on the phone. I want to talk to her daughter. Talk to the daughter and said, I don't know how to tell you this. She's going to die. And you need to come in and see it. Because I knew I couldn't save her life, but this was a meaningful goodbye. Daughter came in, and at that time, that was a similar rule. One family could, in a very controlled way, could come and visit. Not everybody. Had to put on all of the equipment to protect herself, right? Because we want to keep her safe too. I will never forget this image. Literally, so the daughter was there for 5 minutes. She got there, and the patient's blood pressure slowly went down. Her heart rate slowly went down, every oxygen, all of this, and I could see. And I sat there and I watched, and the daughter, and this was not, was this protocol? Probably broke protocol. She was laying her head on her mother's chest, just holding her, tears, as her mother died. She was there for that moment. That's COVID. 260,000 times. So that's the side of me that wants to be like, we got to do something.
Yeah.
This matters. Now, on the other side, do we do a complete lockdown, quarantine, everything for 100 million days? You can't ever go outside and walk. No, that's insane. It's insane. But that is so awful and so painful, and it's so bad for so many people that the question is, this is the question, how can we reopen the economy?
Yeah.
Have people working, whatever, safely to minimize this? That's the question.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the answer is a gray area of back and forth and a dance, and you take it all into account. I don't think the answer is shut everything down and go crazy. And I don't think the answer is COVID's not real, leave it all open.
Yeah, for sure.
It's somewhere in between.
And yeah, I guess, I mean, from these deaths that you've just told me about, I mean, these were like, it's very traumatic, of course. But you mentioned that, they were older people, some with pre-existing conditions. Something that has been in my mind this whole time is like, I mean, as traumatic as that is, like, we are all going to die.
We are all
one day.
Die.
It's like, it's unpreventable. Like, no one is going to live forever. So it's kind of like, no one wants to kill the grandma or, be the reason for a family member getting COVID and going to hospital, or worst case scenario, dying. So, like, is it really worth sacrificing, economies, people's businesses, people's mental health? Suicide rates have gone up. Like, is that like a worthwhile sacrifice for people that might already be on their way out already, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I think the question that you're asking is it worth it? Are we doing more damage by shutting down and the quarantine and the economy and all of this stuff than we're saving, we're preventing by saving lives? I don't know the answer to that. I will make one caveat. The 88-year-old woman, she didn't have a ton of time left.
Yeah.
The 60-year-old lady, she was in bad health, but she might have had a decade.
Yeah.
15 years on average at her condition or whatever. She lost some significant time. Yeah. I don't know the formula. I don't know how you weigh all this stuff. I know that it matters and it should be a part of the conversation. And this is the thing that I want to say is, like, to ask that question, I think it's totally fair. To say, are we doing too much? Is it worth it? I feel like people show up and they've got their position and they're fighting for it. They're like, this is crazy, this is whatever. I'm like, it's really a conversation.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it. And it's a fair question. Is it too much? Are the consequences and the damage from all this, is it too much? Is there a way that we can do it where we do contact trace, and then maybe instead of shutting all restaurants down, we focus on the ones that have had a lot of cases and we just shut those down for a little bit, or make them, or focus there and make them tighten stuff up, or, you know what I mean? Yeah. Are there other ways to do it? I think that's a better question.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Your turn. So you said everybody's going to die. How do you feel about that for yourself?
For me?
Yeah, that you're going to die one day.
I actually, you know what? I've actually come to a place where I'm okay with death. And that's like might be a really crazy thing to say. I'm not suicidal, but I'm okay with it. Like, I know it's going to happen at some point. yes, it's scary, but it doesn't scare me. And I think the reason for that is I have had many, well, not many, but there has been a few instances in my life where I have been close to death. A number of times.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know. I think the last time that this situation happened, that was really, really traumatic and bad. And yeah, I definitely knew that I could die. Something changed in me, and I was like, I am going to live my best life like right now. I'm not going to wait, until I get married and have kids and do this and this and this and tick all the boxes. I was like, I'm going to make my life amazing now, so that I'm not like scared about dying. I feel like people get scared of dying because they feel like they're running out of time, and I haven't done this and I haven't done that. So for me, death is like, even already I'm 27. Even at my age now, I feel like I've done so much. Like if I died tomorrow, I would know that I've lived a freaking amazing life, So for me, it doesn't scare me. So sometimes I feel like I can maybe sound a bit heartless, saying like, "Oh, we're all gonna die, guys." But I guess that's from my experience.
Yeah, but it's like one of the basic reality, like it's part of the deal of being human.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I don't know if you want to talk about one of those moments or that moment that you came close. But one question I do have for you about that was when you came out of it and you said, I'm going to live my life now. What changed? What did you do next differently?
Well, I don't want to get too much into the story of that because it's a bit hectic, but yeah, it's way too hectic for this live.
Yeah,
it's for another.
It's a good one though. You should. I'm really curious about it. It sounds like it made a big impact on you. In fact, I have a show called Life Can Change in a Moment, where the reason I'm asking about this is because that sounds like it was a moment for you.
Yeah.
And those are my favorite things to like get into and talk about. So I was like, oh wow, that sounds like a moment. I wonder what happened there, because it really sounds like you changed because of it.
Yeah, it was a very it's definitely a story for. We'll do that on another.
Maybe we will. Story. And for everybody who's interested in Life Can Change in a Moment, it is on Spotify and Apple Podcast. I had to shamelessly promote that. You can type my name in, or Life Can Change in a Moment. It's beautiful. It's a video podcast. We did it right here. Anyway, maybe one day we'll have you on that show and you can talk about that. But that sounds like exactly what that was.
I would absolutely love to. I feel like it's a really important. A really important conversation that I would love to share at some point, but not now. But
well done. Way to say no. That's good.
What was your question again? What changed?
Yeah, you said I'm going to start living my life now, and I wanted to know, what did that mean? What did you do differently right then?
From what I went through, I actually got a lot of therapy, and I started like meditating and things like that. It was also around that time that I started my own business, so in health coaching and business coaching. And I kind of went away on this trip doing like a volunteer trip after all this traumatic stuff happened. And that was really life-changing. I was working in Thailand and the Philippines with, kids that were orphans, in villages, people that didn't have food. And seeing that and dealing with that firsthand after that traumatic experience made me realize that maybe my life wasn't so bad, and maybe my life can really change and turn around. So when I got home from this trip, I just got back into like a 9-to-5 job. And I was like, man, like, and I'd already quit university before this. And I was like, man, I just don't want this to be the rest of my life.
How old were you?
20.
20.
Yeah. And so I started a business.
So you quit college, university, and then you started your own business.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Went traveling and then started my own business. And when I got back, I was like, I just want my life to be happy. I don't want to live my life for anyone else. I don't want to live my life for other people's expectations. Like, I've had so many traumatic experiences throughout my life already. I want that to change. So I want every day to be a happy day. And I have the ability to do that. I can choose. So that's kind of the big thing that changed in me.
That's huge.
Knowing that I can choose my own happiness.
No, that's
in
huge.
Life. Yeah, and make it whatever I want it to be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about that another time.
We got a little off topic, but that's cool. We'll definitely do.
There's no such thing as off topic.
No, but I love that. I love having these natural conversations. It's not too interviewy. But let's get back into COVID.
Yeah, you got it. You got it, host. Sometimes you got to keep me focused. I go all over the place.
No, for sure. So we kind of already answered this already. So we'll go to the next one. What do you think about deaths that are from other causes but are being counted as COVID?
That's bullshit.
Do you think that the deaths are being counted accurately?
It's never going to be 100% perfect, but this idea that doctors are just writing COVID on the chart so the hospital gets paid more. And this is the great example that people give. Oh, somebody dies of a heart attack, or somebody dies of a car accident and they have COVID and they're putting COVID on the chart. Give me a break, you guys. Like, how many people are dying in car accidents with COVID? That's that is the most ignorant, not informed example that I've ever heard. That doesn't happen in a significant way. This is all part of the people that don't believe that COVID is a thing. It's that conspiracy thing. It's complete bullshit and should be put to rest, period. I've filled out plenty of death certificates.
Yeah.
You put what they died of. So let me give you an example. Let's say somebody got COVID and I told you that you can die from kidney failure.
Yeah.
So the top of the thing, the immediate causation from that, like the potassium is high from kidney failure. But what caused the kidney failure? What was the underlying cause of that? It was COVID.
Yeah.
And then they have this classification, this thing called, so somebody, let's say somebody who had a little bit of kidney problems and was obese, got COVID, and then COVID caused the rest of their kidney to fail, and then they died of kidney failure. It accelerated it. The cause of their death is still considered to be kidney failure from COVID.
Right.
And they had bad health. This is the best example that I've heard about this that puts that to waste. And I think this is complete bullshit. But this example is really good. The fires in California, right? So there's a lot of dry land. There's a lot of really dry brush and trees. There's a lot of houses that made of whatever flammable stuff. What caused, there's something that caused, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like people saying you're trying to blame the underlying, I'm screwing this thing up, but
no, you're making sense.
COVID is the fire, like that's the thing that burned the house down. That's the thing that killed somebody. Yeah, somebody's house, the trees may be really dry, but the fire still burned the house down. You know what I mean? That's the point of that thing. People still have underlying conditions. Yes. I agree with the statement that as a country, we're not very healthy. That's a big issue here. Let's not forget that as part of this. You can get into all of the racial and minority issues and for a lot of reasons, those guys are less healthy, and a lot of it's structural bullshit.
Yeah.
COVID has really exposed a lot of that. So
yeah, interesting.
But COVID's the fire, man. Fires burn houses down, not dry trees. Dry trees don't burn houses down.
No, it's kind of interesting to hear you say that. I mean,
what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do have, friends that work in hospitals. Other friends that work in hospitals, and yeah, I've heard so many different things. And I guess you've said it, COVID has accelerated these deaths. It's not like they've just counted the deaths as COVID when they didn't have COVID at all. You know what I mean? So it does make a lot of sense. But yeah, I do know people in Australia, I don't know if it's happened here, that have, gone to a testing station, they've put their name down and blah, blah, blah. They didn't actually do the test, but then they got a letter saying that they were positive for COVID, but they didn't actually physically have the test. So that's something that I just find really strange. And I mean, I've seen a number of cases where this has happened. Yeah.
Look, the system is not perfect by
Yeah.
any means. Testing is not perfect. Somebody may have COVID and their test comes out negative, but I still know they have COVID and then later it's positive.
Yeah.
It's not black and white. That said, I don't think that improper diagnoses are widespread. I don't think misdiagnosis is significantly widespread.
Mhm.
There's going to be some of that in a system. It's human. It's not perfect. I don't deny that.
Mm.
But just call it what it is. There's a bunch of folks that don't think this is as big of a deal as it is. And this is one way to argue against that. Oh, COVID's not really that bad. They're just all putting it on the death certificates. Like, no, they really died of COVID, bro.
Yeah.
You know, like there may be
Or
some where it's not,
accelerated or whatever.
That's the real issue. There's something, and I want to ask you about this, like this has affected your life and your work, and I want to, get your feelings on it. So many people are frustrated with the state of the world. You can't travel.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go to bars and restaurants. You can't, especially young people, can't go out and have fun like they have been before. That sucks.
Yeah.
Part of what society, countries are asking of everybody, including them, which puts an undue burden of taking a lot of this fun away from young people, is to not do those things for others.
Mm-hmm.
COVID, there is some risk to them of getting symptoms, being a long hauler that could last a while, but largely the message is everybody needs to kind of wear masks, distance, stay home, not do this kind of stuff. And it's benefiting old folks, minorities, those who are in poor health, benefits them much more than it benefits young people. They're not as much risk.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say a lot of folks resent that. They don't like that. It's giving up too much. I mean, how do you feel about that? How has it impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean, I personally haven't had COVID. I mean, I've been tested a number of times for COVID and been negative. But I do have a lot of friends that have tested positive, and majority of them have had no symptoms, or they've had just very mild symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, for me, it's really frustrating. I mean, of course, it's frustrating that my goals and dreams of modeling have definitely gone on the wayside, and it's definitely.
Has it affected your modeling and your work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, last year I traveled 20 countries, and
2019.
2019, yeah, and modeled in a lot of those countries. So yeah, for me it is really hard because traveling is my work and what I do as well. So it's frustrating. For me, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I've got savings, I've got other stuff happening in my life, my business.
You're living off of savings now.
No, I have my business as well. So
good.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm chill. I have other business opportunities and I'm still getting some modeling. But it's not the end of the world for me, but I know for a lot of people it is a really hard struggle. Even not being able to see friends, or people that have grandparents that they have to see, not being able to see them, things like that is really difficult. So I mean, for a lot of my friends and everything, even if they've had COVID, they've survived. They haven't had symptoms. So it's kind of, it's really frustrating not being able to go to a bar on a Saturday night, or even go play sport, or go have a picnic with your friends. Like that stuff is really hard. And I watched your Thanksgiving video that you made, and I even asked you some questions about it, so I ask it again now. With managing these things, wouldn't it just be great if we can do a COVID test before we go see our grandma or before we're in contact with an elderly person. I mean, you know, in my ideal world, that would be what we do. You know, you go get tested and then you go see your grandma, or just don't go see them or whatever. Like, yeah, for me, I feel like there's better ways to manage it than
Yeah,
we are.
and we talk about the grandma thing. It's a great example. Before Thanksgiving, one of my messages was "Don't kill your grandma at Thanksgiving," which was directed at younger people who, especially those who are traveling a lot, going to these cities that are open, going to parties and bars, going to Tulum and Cancun, and I don't want to like shame them. People
I was just there.
People are struggling and trying to get by, and they still want to have fun, and I get that. My worry was literally some people are going to bring COVID home and it's going to kill their grandma, and they're going to feel terrible.
Yeah.
And so that was the intent. But then this is where you have to put everything together. Then people said, but my grandma's already incredibly lonely and isolated. How can we exclude her from Thanksgiving and not do anything? And I'm like, I totally agree. That's a huge issue. Nursing homes now, those are tough to begin with. And then COVID goes through there like wildfire. So they say no visitors.
Yeah.
That's awful for the people that live there. And so then it's like, well, what can we do? Either how can we do? So that becomes a question.
Yeah.
This is a thing for young people. You're kind of a young person, right?
Kind of.
I'm putting you in the young person category. I'm like in the middle, okay? I'm not so young anymore. We all saw the handlebars. It's white and gray. But then it becomes a question.
Yeah.
How? It's a how question. How can we do both? How can we keep grandma safe and not kill her, but then also not isolate her and like include her in an event, whatever. So when I was home at Kansas City months ago, we would go over and see grandma in the driveway and keep a distance. Now we've got the challenge of weather. Yeah. So it just becomes a question of how can we do this?
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. This stuff is, it's still important.
Yeah.
Let me say one other thing. One of my friends moved to Tulum. And I was like, wow, because LA's all shut down. It's kind of low energy. It's like kind of depressing sometimes to be here. And then like I keep seeing all of this stuff, including one friend, people go down to Tulum. And if you go there and party and go out, you're going to get COVID. Like everybody. And so this friend of mine texting me, freaking out. His wife was short of breath. I was like, you got to get out of Mexico. But what are you going to do? Get on a plane with COVID or not? And so I get it. There's this, we're struggling with this fatigue and the pandemic, and there's real mental health stuff. But I don't know that that's the right answer either.
Yeah.
That's it. That stuff seems too risky. You're going to go to a beach and whatever and keep to yourself. The flight, there's some risk. But like going to these places and super partying and whatever. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I can empathize with the young people that have had so much taken away from them without their consent, without feeling like they're like, yeah, let's do this. It was like, no, you're not doing this. Yeah. It's like orders coming from above, and it's like, just sucks.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I saw an article just the other day about an elder lady who didn't want to go through another quarantine and be locked down, and she was asked to be euthanized.
The one that was euthanized.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Which is just so sad. And I mean, she's not the only one. I mean, the suicide rates have gone up. But I mean, I've seen so many videos from
How old was she?
Home. I can't remember her exact age. But I've seen so many stories and videos of older people in their homes or in nursing homes who are crying. People who are wishing they're dead. And it's kind of like, man, it's just so hard to manage that. Like, I mean, sometimes I think, and this is just how I think, if I was 80 years old and I've lived an amazing long life, I would rather be able to hug my family goodbye and have it over and done with, you know what I mean, than to just be sitting alone. I mean, even when I was doing proper quarantine in Australia, it was super depressing. I was drinking wine every night by myself. I never do that. But like, I was like, oh my God, this is so bad. And I can't even imagine what it'd be like being at the end of your life and you can't even give someone a hug. Like, yeah.
I totally agree. And let's highlight that as a problem. You know, what can we do about that? How can we make that better? It is an unintended consequence of all the shutdown and quarantine and everything. This isolation and depression, especially elderly and suicide, all that stuff, so real. What can we do about it? You know, my own grandma, she's in her 90s. Same thing. We struggle with that stuff, and she said, this was a tweet that I said months ago, and she said, well, what if I got COVID? And I said, well, you might die. And she's like, is that so bad? And I was like, Grandma, in my experience as a doctor, many patients, I would probably even say most, people might disagree with me. Most folks, when they get to 90, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
They've lived their life. Their spouse, their partners, a lot of their friends have died. They're ready to die.
Yeah.
And so it's a quality versus quantity time. Do you want to live longer and miserable, or would you rather have human interaction and take your chances with COVID?
Yeah.
I get it. Let's talk about how to do that safely. Why is this such a trade-off?
Yeah.
How can we still include grandma? That's kind of the one. But then, especially in America, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but older people, and this is probably their number one fear, is they don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
And that's what the nursing home is. You know, the code for nursing home is burden and death. It's where you go to not be a burden, where you're not wanted, and where people die. And that's not necessarily the reality of it always, but that's the fear of the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's a real problem. There's all of these, COVID does this. It highlights all of these problems that we have. Kind of brings them to the surface. Racial disparity and inequity in health, that's another one that comes up. It's like, wow,
yeah,
more Black people are dying percentage-wise than white. What's that about? More Hispanics are dying, more Native American are dying. Why? Starting asking these questions and highlighting these issues.
Interesting.
And it's the same, it's very similar too. It really puts an added focus on what are we doing in nursing homes?
Yeah.
And what's our value as a culture. It's unfortunate. A lot of cultures, elderly are regarded as having the wisdom that live their lives, the elders of the tribe. You know, they are respected in that way. And I don't know that we do that here. We kind of value youth and vigor, and it's understandable, but there's also things to really appreciate about having lived a life, and so it kind of exposes a lot of these.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And I mean, I really understand that. A lot of people have even said, our older people, if we had a disease that affected young people, they'd do the same for us. But it's like, but that's not the situation right now. And even what you said, like, some older people are ready to go. And I mean, very recently, my grandfather died. I'm sure he would have liked a bit longer, but I remember having a conversation with him that, he's getting old and he'd had cancer and a few other things, health issues multiple times. So it's not like it was unexpected. He was undergoing a treatment or procedure and passed during that, not of COVID. But I think that he would have been ready to go. And my grandma, she's in her late 80s or maybe even 90. If she might even be watching this. Hi, Grandma.
Hey, Grandma.
But she's joked around with stuff like that before too, and it's like, it's not like they're unaware at that age that they're gonna keep living, that they're not gonna live forever. But we've been going for quite a while now.
It's been good.
Yeah, it's been really good. I would like to just kind of jump through these next few questions.
I know I get long-winded. I apologize.
No, it's good. It's been
maybe next time we'll give you like a little club you can hit me
Kinda
with.
just-
You're like, come on, faster.
Order. So juicy question. How do you feel about the vaccine? Do you think it should be mandatory for everyone, even to travel? Like I mentioned before, Qantas in Australia, the airline there just mentioned that it'll be mandatory for people to have a vaccine to travel. So how do you feel about it? Do you think it should be mandatory for everyone, or should it be a personal choice?
How do I feel about the vaccine? Without question, the vaccine, is going to end the pandemic more than anything else. It's our way out. Without it, the only other way to do it is have millions, at least in America, die. So it's necessary. Should there be mandatory vaccination? No, I don't know that doesn't feel right. I think I would hope that, so there's a formula, very simple formula. We have to get to 70%.
Yeah.
That's about the number of people that either need to get infected. And I want to say in the US, we're around maybe 10%, maybe. So we've got a little bit from herd immunity, a little bit of that natural immunity. So we got to make up 60% with a vaccine. 60% the vaccine has to be, it takes into account two things: number of people that get vaccinated and how effective the vaccine is. Two of these vaccines now, one of them including the Moderna one we talked about, Moderna is the name of the company that came up with it, are 90% effective. So to get that 60%, you would need a little over 60% of the population to get it because it's 90% effective. And then over time, COVID would go like this.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't go away 100%, but it would go down to a level where, minimal deaths from it. It wouldn't. So would I make it mandatory? God, I would hope that enough people would get it without having to think about that. I don't know how accepted that. There's just a lot of problems with that.
Yeah. I mean, would you personally get the vaccine?
I don't have any concerns about it being not safe and everything. We talked for a little bit about Operation Warp Speed. That's what the government and Trump called the development of the vaccine, which is a modern miracle in science. I mean, that we came up with a vaccine in this amount of time is insane. There's no vaccine for HIV. The flu vaccine is on average about 50% effective. And we came up with two vaccines that's 90% effective against it. That's insane. Like the ability for all of us to focus from government and big pharma and private, whatever, to focus on creating that vaccine. It's a modern miracle. Like there really should be a pause and like, thank God for science kind of thing. It's such a huge thing. I think it is awesome. And it will save countless lives. I'm very pro-vaccine, in case you didn't know. For that reason. But that said, the other question you had about the Australian airliner who's requiring proof of vaccination, I would imagine they would either require you to be vaccinated or have proof that you got COVID to fly. That's this idea of an immunity passport. There's a lot of problems with that. I don't know.
It's scary.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I think practically it may not be that big of an issue because I think enough people, again, the hope is enough people get vaccinated in the spring, early 2021. It goes down to where it gets to a certain level, everybody can freely travel. I don't know that an immunity passport like that is going to be a thing.
And I mean, we've never seen something like that in like the history of the world. I mean, I do know there's certain countries that you have to have maybe a certain vaccination to enter that country. I mean, I had vaccinations to go to India.
That's true.
And someone told me the other day you have to have a certain vaccine, I think, to go to South America. I'm not unsure what that is.
Yeah, there's like yellow fever and things like that. That's right.
But I kind of, it like concerns me that they think that there's one vaccine fits all. I mean, I even said this to John on my last interview. I mean, there's people with allergies and there's people that have, health complications. If they had a vaccine, maybe the problems that have from the vaccine are going to be worse than COVID itself. And also, I mean, there was an interview that with with Bill Gates on a news channel. I can't remember which one, but she mentioned the Moderna vaccine. And she said, there's a lot of health concerns, and there's been some bad side effects from the vaccine, some that are worse than COVID itself. And he didn't really have an answer for that. He was just like, oh, well, it was just like a really strange answer. And it's kind of like, why are we, if vaccinations are supposed to fix the problem, then why can't the people that, are more likely to get COVID, like the elderly or people that are already pre-existing conditions, if they're really worried about it, that they can choose to take the vaccine. That's something that's like confusing to me.
Yeah.
Like, why do we not have that freedom of choice for the vaccine? And I mean, the flu vaccine has been around for a long time now, and people are still getting the flu and dying of the flu.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a flu shot when I was studying paramedicine because I had to do my school.
Yeah.
But I still got the flu. In fact, I've had many times that I've been sick after that. So it's like, yeah, how can we expect that this COVID vaccine is going to be the miracle drug that makes everything go back to normal?
So I think the thing that I would highlight in what you're saying is there's a couple concerns about the vaccine. Number one is, and this goes, you and I talked about this before, this goes throughout medicine, that a principle, and I think this, everybody believes in this, which is the vaccine, the benefits of it, people, which is mainly people not dying of COVID, people not getting COVID and having all the complications, which is real and significant. Those benefits these benefits have to outweigh the risk of side effects, of people getting sick from the vaccine or whatever. It always has to do that. If you give 20 million vaccines and you get 18 million complications, that is wrong. Like, that is a morally wrong. And this is what initial trials are geared to pick up in the short term, right? I mean, it's not long-term data. It's short-term markers and data to see if it increases the risk of significant medical stuff. That should take care of that stuff. But the principle, the fear that you're bringing up about, gosh, we don't want the vaccine to be worse than the thing, that's absolutely correct. You talk about some vaccines like the flu, for example, there are 1 in a million side effects of some vaccine, like Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's this neurological thing that does come from a flu shot. It's about 1 in a million, 1.5, less than 2 in a million. It's very uncommon, but it does happen. Yeah. So some people who get it, get this very undesired consequence. Now, the flip side, and sort of if you're that person, you're like, I hate vaccines. I mean, that's where part of anti-vax came from, is people who had real problems, although however minimal, was real. And they're like, we shouldn't do it. But again, it comes back to, well, if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be saving lives. You wouldn't be, the benefit of it always has to outweigh the risk.
Yeah.
That has to be the case. So if it's, and I can't imagine that it wouldn't be, okay, that the benefit outweighs the risk. Now, what complications are there of these vaccines? I haven't reviewed the data. There's absolutely going to be some.
Yeah.
They'll have to be small. They're going to track it. If it turns out they're significant, they'll shut it down. One thing that you and I talked about was, these are all publicly traded companies. They come up with a vaccine, their stock price goes up. If they come up with a vaccine that's not safe, and that months down the road or in the long term doesn't work, that's a worse vaccine. Their stock price is going to go down. Their stock, it's in their interest to make a vaccine that works and is safe. Then they would make more money. And I think we all agree that that's profit is driving a lot of that. And I think mission.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, there was a lot of things that you said in there that I wanted to talk about. You and I talked about this, so I'll pose this question to you. There's a limited number of vaccinations available. Who should get it? Who should get it first? This is a very real and practical question we have to answer is who gets the vaccine, because not everybody can have it that wants it.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Who gets it?
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, if I was in charge, I guess it would
If
be...
you were queen.
If I was queen, I guess it would be, the people that are vulnerable. And if they wanted to take it, I wouldn't say that, oh, you have to take it because you might die. Like, everyone should have the choice whether they want to have it or not. But I think, yes, the elderly, the people that have pre-existing conditions, if people are concerned about getting COVID and dying. But yeah, at the end of the day, no matter how many vaccines there are made or not, people should just have a choice whether they want it or not. And like the thing that I think of is like, if vaccines work, then like, why does everyone have to have them? You know what I mean? Like, for me personally, I'm not completely anti-vax, and I'm also not pro-vax. I think a lot of people think I'm anti-vax. I mean, I've had vaccines. I can't be anti it, but I don't want this vaccine, and I don't want my life to be controlled because I haven't had it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so many people that feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really think my personal opinion is it should be a choice. And yeah, if I was to hand out vaccines, it would be for the people that want it and people that are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think you're right. You know, the flip side of it is like, who's dying the most of COVID right now? Older, medical, minority. They're at the front of the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then healthcare workers, people who are
Yeah.
exposed the most and at the most risk, and those are probably the ones that are. But that's a big medical ethics issue. We just need enough people to get it, to get to that 70%. Not everybody's gonna get it. Not everybody will take it. We just need people. We just need enough to either get it or get the vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, it's
get it done.
We're living in, it's such an interesting time. I mean,
that's one way to put it. Interesting.
Interesting. I mean, in London, I don't know if you just saw this, and in many parts of the world, actually, I've seen this happen quite a lot. There's been protests about the vaccine already. In London, I think it was actually this week, there was protests and people, you know, saying they don't want the vaccine and things like that. Yet we're still getting pushed these vaccines. And honestly, when I saw the news about the airline in Australia, I was like, I literally don't want to go back to Australia. Mm-hmm. It was just like so off-putting that my freedom of choice is like, feels like it's been taken away. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a dilemma, right? I mean, it's where there is no clear-cut answer and there's conflicting values. So yours is, one of them is very important to you, is freedom of choice, being able to decide for yourself. Yeah. You don't want to be forced to take something. And you and I talked before, and I will admit, you know, this vaccine has gone through an expedited process. Mm. I think it's fair to have concerns about the safety of it and not to be like, hey, I want to be at the front of the line. The stuff that I've read from it, I feel comfortable enough getting in and recommending it to people that I don't think it's a deadly, horrible, whatever thing. But the dilemma, that's the dilemma exactly of what we're going to come into, is this stuff it's like the flip side of it. I don't think it should be mandatory. That doesn't feel right. But also, I think it's true that we're not going to get out of this thing until enough people have either got it or got the vaccine. Yeah. So collectively, it's like we have a choice to make. It's like, here's a way out. I'll do it. I'm in. That's my feeling. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Couple more questions. I really want to. We can go as long as you want. Yeah, people can jump. Have we been going for 6 hours? How long is this thing going? Got all night. No, I'm kidding. We don't. Anybody even watching? It's just been over an hour. I can't even see. But what do you think? Well, what will be the psychological issues from lockdowns and wearing masks? Do you think there'll be any? Oh, I don't think there's anything from the masks. People are just annoyed by that. I don't think there's any real health problems with the mask.
but
Like social
isolation.
distancing, even
What?
people avoiding each other, social distancing.
Oh
things like
yeah,
that.
I think that cultural, change in being warm and greetings and stuff like that. That's sad. Um,
I'm a hugger.
yeah,
I
not
hate
these
it.
days. Very often, you're not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, unless it's like a close friend or someone I'm seeing often, it's like greeting someone from a distance. And for me, it's like so awkward and like depressing to not give someone a hug. It's like so sad.
It is so
But
sad.
yeah,
You know what's funny is when I watch these movies and I'll see people like all together, whatever. I'm like, they're not. My brain's like, they're not social distancing. It's so funny. It just like
That's so
it's
scary.
It's a different
Yeah.
time. I was going to say something else.
What will
talking
the
about?
psychological issues be?
I mean, I've already seen them. I mean, I've seen people in the ER that are suicidal, that have nervous breakdowns, that just get over, which isn't really a thing, but just they just get overwhelmed with the added stress. The world wasn't. We're romanticizing 2019 and before, right? Oh, if it was only
Yeah.
like it was before. That world wasn't perfect, you guys. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
there
for sure.
were people committing suicide that were depressed and all of these problems even back then. We're kind of, I think for so many people it's worse now. And so it's on top of that there's so much stress just at home. And I'm thinking about working parents. I mean, so many people. I've had multiple patients come in who have stress from job stuff. And one of them was really interesting because she came in and had a full-blown panic attack. And she was like, for the last 3 months, I've been waiting to get laid off. And my boss told me, like a week or two ago, that they would tell her on the day she came in if she had a job or not. And the irony was that on that day, she had a job. He said, I'm able to save your job. We're not going to let you go. But she still broke down from the stress. So it was that unknown part of it that just put her over the top. So there's already, we're kind of seeing a lot of us are seeing short-term stuff. The long-term stuff, that plus, these younger people being on their phones and social media and all of the comparisons and all this stuff is just this like wave of depression, suicide that I worry about. It's crazy to say this, but I've had multiple patients who have been suicidal that are 11 and 9 and just young people.
It's horrific.
And there's a lot of challenges to that generation that I worry about going forward. This doesn't help.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people are on their phones even more now.
Yeah.
My daily time on my phone is a bit out of hand, but I feel like
I admit I go down that rabbit hole too.
Yeah. Well, we kind of touched on this already. I mean, and I kind of already mentioned it already as well. But I mean, I'm a very big advocate for freedom. I mean, even when I was a kid, I was like, I mean, my parents would have said I was very rebellious, but I just liked.
You're a rebel.
A rebel at heart. No, I think I just always really valued freedom, and I mean, something I'm passionate about even is like, human trafficking. But I think the reason behind that is because people aren't free. And when this whole COVID thing happened, my biggest frustration is that people don't have freedom. So freedom to choose if they want to have a vaccine or not. Freedom to, I mean, in Australia, we just had crazy long lockdown in Melbourne for ages. People could only leave their house for an hour. There was a curfew at like 8 p.m. or something. I mean, I had friends living there who were like really struggling. The problem for me wasn't COVID or that there was any lockdowns. It's the fact that people didn't have freedom. Like they can't just go out. Like, it's like some of these rules are just so confusing and frustrating. So like, yeah, like what do you...
I hear you. And I want to say for like the Australian audience understands what you're saying. The American audience, a lot of people would agree and think they know what you're talking about. But in Australia, you guys dialed it up. Like you couldn't, if you went between states and you were caught like driving from one state to another, you get fined like $6,000.
Yeah.
Like way more intense
Yeah.
in Australia about the lockdown and enforcing things. Here, it's much more cowboy, you know. So there's these recommendations, but I never heard anybody getting a ticket for not wearing a mask. Like, you can still travel between states. You don't. There's no. I haven't seen any like we don't enforce any of that stuff. The stuff is, you could say, the freedom is way more encroached on in Australia, for example.
Yeah, exactly. It's really frustrating.
You have to do, when you come back, mandatory. That's what Marty did. 14 days. He had to pay for it.
$3,000.
How much?
$3,000.
$3,000 to stay in a hotel quarantined, and it's mandatory. You can't get away from it.
No.
If you try, they bust you.
Well, you get shuttled straight to your hotel.
Like that's way. Like, can you imagine that American audience here listening to this? Like, it's very So when you say that, to put it in that context, it isn't what is going on here. It's way more intense.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of like. I love Americans. You guys are like so rebellious. Like, I mean, maybe not you, but some people I know, you know, the curfew came in at 10 p.m. yet people were still throwing, you know, younger people were still having parties and events. I mean, I just flew back in from Vegas, and on the flight they were saying that interstate, or if you're coming interstate or from another country, you're suggested to quarantine for 2 weeks. I mean, I think they'd have a very hard time mandating that.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting, like,
you know, their cultures are very different in different parts of the world, and I think they'd go nuts. They wouldn't take it here. We got so many people owning guns that just are like, I'm doing it my own way. You leave me alone. We're different. We don't care.
Yeah.
You know, real leadership of what's needed here is not necessarily the mandate and the big government, whatever. It's understanding people. It's listening to them and what they want. And it's forming that trust with the whole land. And then at the end is the ask. When you wear the mask, I want you to do the distance. That's maybe the best we can do here. Mandates and a bunch of rules, and it might not work. You know, it's a matter of it's another. I'm chalking them all up to dilemmas. There's no easy answers to these things.
Yeah, 100%.
But I do wish that we had more of that conversation. Not a strong arm, you have to do this, but hey, let's really talk about why we want you to do this. It's your choice, and this is why I want you to choose this. You know, maybe to kind of put it like that. That's a little more of a Republican approach as opposed to kind of the left Democrat. Well, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to be a mask mandate. And, you know, I don't know what they're going to do yet with Biden and all that, but
yeah, it's actually interesting seeing that in the US. I mean, after the election, is just like how different areas, depending if they're Republican or Democrat, are run. Like even in California, I mean, California is more of a democratic state, but in more Republican areas, you see that things are very different. Like so different. So last two questions. The last one, this one's more about Christmas coming up. I mean, there's lockdowns they're getting a bit more strict in California. And different parts of the US and Europe right now. But how can people kind of keep safe going into this Christmas period? I mean, you talked about this with Thanksgiving, you know, we don't want to kill grandma, but how can people have balance between being able to see their family, you know, celebrate Christmas and be safe?
It can't, there's no one size fits all answer. How can you still have can you have some kind of gathering? You got to answer that yourself. If you're going to do it, you know, having some kind of quarantine-ish thing, I wouldn't, you know, wouldn't let the family member that's going to Tulum come home and have Christmas dinner with grandma, for example. If you wanted to be 100% safe, you would quarantine 14 days and you would get a test beforehand. And if it's negative, then you could feel pretty good about getting together. A little bit of risk would be don't be stupid and go to the big things you know you're going to get, which is like big events. Don't go to church. You know, Don't go to Tulum. Don't go to whatever. Be reasonable. Wear your mask. Do the distancing. Do the basic stuff that I think most reasonable people do.
Mm.
And then see, can you set it? Can you do it outside? Can you keep something at a distance? If you can't do that stuff, or you're not comfortable with that, what can you do? You know, setting up Zooms. And I actually had a fun time Zooming. I Zoomed in with other friends' families and talked to their moms. And I actually liked that part. So I connected in other ways around the holiday that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
The real answer to the question is, how big of a risk is it to you? So how old are you? What are your risk factors? All that. And then the other half of it, what's your risk tolerance? So it could be an old granny. It could be like, you know what? I'd rather take my chances and get together for holidays. I understand that there's the chance something bad could happen. Okay, I think that's reasonable. I think you just have to figure out what's important to you and then live that way. Live your life accordingly.
No, I love that. And I mean, for me, I think I've only got one grandparent left now, and she's in South Africa. So for me, it's not, I mean, I'm on the other side of the world from my family, so I'm not even going to see my family this Christmas. But of course, I will probably meet up with friends or whatever. But yeah, like there's people saying that there's going to be restrictions and you can't have these gatherings. And it's so like unfair and frustrating because I'm like, well, I'm not even going to see anyone that's probably in their over 50 during Christmas time.
Then it's not as big of a risk,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
If you're not going to encounter anybody afterwards in a reasonable whatever, then it doesn't matter as much. That's true.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's not like anything you can do about it, but it is frustrating that things are getting mandated when, you know, there's younger people that want to get together, orphans like me.
Well, the other side of that, I totally understand your frustration. The other side of it that makes it hard is that the more the virus goes around, let's say in a younger population, the more unsafe the world is for those who are at risk. And so we're really not in a bubble. You know, we're not all packed in together right next to each other either. It's less than that. I don't know what the analogy is. I'm trying to think of a visual analogy of how we're kind of in this together, but our choices do affect other people, and this is a great example of that. I think what society is asking of you and some other people is to be mindful of how you affect not just yourself, but those who are older.
Yeah.
When I think about this, and I think it has to be posed in that way too, it's an invitation. The mandate, the more the mandate, there's a mandated, you have to do whatever. You're gonna see a whole generation that's gonna grow up with one of these. It's gonna be like, let me tell you about that mandate. Let me tell you what I feel like doing for society.
Yeah.
You know? So let me ask you a question. I know your feelings on freedom. So let's say you mandated nothing. You're in charge of, you're the queen of, what do you want your country to be called?
Bubblegum.
Bethland?
Bethland, yeah.
You're Queen Beth of Bethland. It's a great country, by the way. It's incredible.
Thank you.
And so you've got COVID going around. What would you do as the supreme leader of Bethland? What would you do? Doesn't sound like you like mandates.
No.
So how would you approach that issue?
Yeah, I mean, big question. Feel a lot of responsibility on my hands.
Yeah, they're your people. They love you. They trust you.
Yeah. I mean, I really do believe that we have choices regardless of things are mandated or not. People are always going to make their own choice. And I grew up with my dad always saying, you know, there's choices and consequences for everything you do in life.
Yeah.
And
true.
whether it's a bad consequence or a good consequence. I would 100% give people the freedom of choice. But you really, I feel like the media and people really like kind of are making things, and the government are mandating things and making things, you know, giving people the facts of death counts and stuff like that. Because a lot of people do like follow that 100%. And sadly, I mean, I think a lot of people are just riddled in fear as well. So that does definitely take a big portion of people and kind of control them in some way. So I understand that. But I do just feel like, you know, you can tell people the numbers and give them the risks and, you know, let people know the worst case scenarios. But at the end of the day, people.
So you would say
have a choice.
inform them, tell them the truth, would you encourage them to wear masks and distance, or what would you tell them to do?
I think I'd definitely encourage, you know, social distancing, and like you even said it on your Thanksgiving thing, you know, maybe have it outside where, you know, you're not breathing all each other's air inside the home, but obviously it's cold right now. But you know, find other ways that you can
Work
do things.
around.
Maybe don't hug grandma. She can have a little spot in the corner of the yard, you know.
Her depressed corner of the yard.
Yeah, or you can all put on your mask or whatever or you can even ask, you know, grandma, if you get COVID, like, are you okay with the consequence of that? You know what I mean? Like giving people that choice, or even giving people some sort of this is so nerdy.
Well, I think
risk assessment sheet, like, you know, go through this risk assessment.
Haven't we done this?
Yeah, I guess we have.
So what do you do? Would you do anything? Let's say you start that and you say everything you did.
Mm-hmm.
And then cases are going like this.
Yeah.
They go up. Then what do you do?
Lockdowns. No, I'm just kidding.
So I was like, do you? Your
No.
people are like, we love you. A bunch of them are like, please protect us.
Yeah. God, it's a hard question.
This is Bethland, by the way.
It's a very happy place.
You care about these people.
No, for sure. I mean, I feel like, yeah, when you care about someone, they should always still have freedom. I don't feel like, yeah, God, I don't know what sort of leader I'd be, but I feel like if you love something, you should have it in open hands. And if people do need to make those choices and decisions for themselves, I mean, if cases,
Queen Beth,
if
your
cases,
country's making poor choices. COVID is running wild. People are dying everywhere.
Yeah.
You're on the fire. You're sticking with your freedom.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I would probably make stricter decisions for sure. Like, you know. But yeah, I mean, I like what it's like in the US. You know, you guys are making these lockdowns and things like that, but people still do have a lot of freedom. In Australia, it wasn't like that in a lot of states, and I was completely against how they managed things. I mean, we had a state that had like 30 cases a day or 100 cases a day, and they locked down 6 million people. It's like, why can't you, you know, protect the vulnerable? Why are we, you know, affecting so many people's lives when, you know, just the elderly, the people that already have pre-existing conditions? I feel like there's something we can do.
I think there's a ton of things we could do better. I don't know that you have to jump to a mandate and all that stuff, but I understand it's a blunt tool. When I look at countries like New Zealand that had single-digit case numbers, not deaths.
Yeah,
cases like single-digit per day, or Japan.
Even
that had like
Sweden.
No, Sweden's not a good example. They're terrible. They're as bad as we are. Japan, a lot of these Asian countries that have done really, really well. Let's have no ego. What did they do? Mm-hmm. What did they do right? What can we do here? I mean, cat's out of the bag. We're behind and screwed, and the only thing they're going to do is, you know, let people die or shut things down. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, final question, and it's actually the exact question you just asked me, but if you're calling all the shots, how would you think it's best to manage COVID and keeping balance?
I'm gonna give you one example. So Los Angeles just closed all restaurants. They don't even have outdoor dining anymore. Mm-hmm. What I would have done instead would have been to set up contact tracing. Australia did this. You go to a restaurant, you have to give them your phone number.
Yep. Your name, everything.
So you can go, but you give it. And then if somebody there had COVID, they track everybody down.
Yeah.
And what I would suggest is you incentivize, and this would take a lot of work, and it would take a system that we don't have. We don't have the manpower, we don't spend on it. You know, we don't have it. But you would say, I don't know what the number would be, but you would tell all restaurants, look, if you have X number of cases, then we're going to drop your number of people that can go there down by 25% or whatever.
Yeah.
So that it's their individual restaurant responsibility to maintain, to do whatever they got to do to keep numbers down.
Yeah.
And so, because what you see with these contact tracing is that there's hotspots, this place and that place and whatever. And what we do now is we close everybody down.
Yeah.
Instead, why don't you close down the places where it's coming from?
Yeah.
You know, the people where it passes through and it ends up being kind of a super spreader event.
Mm-hmm.
Close down those, like the Whaler down the street at midnight on Friday or Saturday. That was like not distancing at all. Like I was walked by that, I was uncomfortable. Like I'm not getting a beer at this place, you know, like that was too much.
Mm-hmm.
But then there were other places where there was enough distance, and I was like, this seems okay. I don't think there's a lot of stuff coming from there. You shut down the Whalers. Sorry for people that are watching like the Whaler, but come on, that was out of control. I think I like that idea for a lot of reasons, because then restaurants care because their business would stay open if they did a good job.
Do the right thing,
Yeah, and I think you could expand that idea to other. I mean, department stores. Everybody has to give their, everybody has to give their cell phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
The other thing too, that's a real dilemma that I don't know, but there's crazy technology. You can wear one of these rings or some of these devices that can detect changes in your skin or heart rate, and you can correlate those for increased risk of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And so your phone then alerts, do you have COVID, whatever, somehow involving that in a contact tracing thing. Now, people hate the idea of the government having access to that, following you, and they go crazy with all of that.
Yeah.
But the potential to limit this, if somehow you could not infringe too much, but use technology, and they do this in Asia, in ways that can preserve other freedoms, but help combat this disease. I don't know what those answers are, but I know there's better ways to do it than just shutting down all the restaurants in the state of California, for example.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. So I would get together, get all of these tech guys that are way smarter than me and be like, how can we fix this? How can we make this good?
Mm-hmm.
Put all those heads together, invest money, and do it a much smarter, creative way than just this blunt shut it all down tool. I think we could have done better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always wanted to have like my own restaurant or cafe or like traditional business, and seeing how things are now. I'm obviously hoping that it'll end at some point. But it's scary. Like, I mean, I couldn't even imagine what it's like trying to run a business in this time, having to open and close. Like, all the food that you've bought for like a whole week of to be sold in your restaurants now going to waste. And like, I don't know how some businesses are still existing if they haven't closed down already. So, yeah, I really like that answer though. It was a lot better than mine. I was a bit lost with what to say.
You were put on the spot. You weren't ready for it, Queen Beth.
I'm the interviewer.
maybe next time you could say, well, as the Queen of Bethland, I'm going to have tons of experts, and they're going to figure out how to do this.
Exactly. I'll have people like you who have their expertise and great brains.
I don't have the ideas, but I would
have a team.
Get a smarter team to figure this problem out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Hey, thanks for doing this. This was great. I'm glad we could do. I really like this conversation.
No,
I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, I mean, it was awesome. I feel like we answered so many questions that were like very different to the last interview, and you have a very different point of view, and I loved it. It's so good, and I feel like a lot of people are gonna agree and love what you said. Some people might not.
I don't care if everybody agrees, but it's a conversation, and I'm happy to hear what people say. They can go back. I want to close with this. At some point, I do want to have you on the show. Life can change in a moment. I'm really curious what happened that changed your life years ago. Sounds like a really interesting story.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, let's
that you're living.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was extreme, very, very, very life-changing. So yeah, I'd love to share that with everyone. Actually,
another time, maybe next time.
Yeah.
But if you want to check out that incredible podcast, by the way, Life Can Change in a Moment. It's on Spotify, my YouTube channel, Dr. Larry Burchett. Let me just go ahead and self-promote for a
Go.
moment. Is
I was
that
going to do it, but you do it.
And there's I also have a podcast called the COVID Doctor Journal where I talk about stuff that I see. That's out there. The New York stuff is really good to check out. Just type my name in Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and if you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. Send me a message, say hi.
Yeah, if you guys have any further questions, because obviously I haven't even looked at any of these live questions, and we're not going to answer any live questions today. But if you do have any questions, please head over to Dr. Larry's Instagram. I'm sure you'll be...
Dr. Larry Burchett.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer your questions, whatever he can. And of course, there is so much information on his Instagram. I mean, I've gone and watched a ton of his videos about COVID and everything else he talks about.
Well, that's nice. Thank you.
He's a man of wisdom, and yeah, I really appreciate your time and everything you've shared with us today. So thank you.
This was great.
So much.
Thanks for tuning in.
I'm going to end these lives now.
See you next time. Stay safe, everybody. Will you save that thing for me? End stream.
I shall.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye. Oh, sorry, I missed your one to say goodbye. Share to download the video. Couldn't save. Oh, shit. Maybe it's